Commander Relic Thas had always believed that history was like mathematics, clean, precise, and utterly predictable. This was before he opened the Heliopause war files and discovered that history, much like quantum mechanics, had a disturbing tendency to exist in multiple contradictory states simultaneously. The Union Records Station 9KB floated in the void like a bureaucratic mausoleum, its corridors echoing with the ghosts of classified documents and redacted testimonies. Relic's footsteps rang hollow against metal decking that hadn't felt organic footfall in over a decade. Personal log, Historian Commander Relic Thas, standard date 2387.4. He spoke into his recorder, his irisy bioluminescent patterns flickering with academic excitement. Beginning comprehensive review of declassified Heliopause war archives. Finally, after 70 years of Union censorship, we can examine the final campaign before the Terran collapse. He paused at the central archive terminal, its surface gleaming like a promise of forbidden knowledge. The Union claims this war was a minor territorial dispute. Casualties, minimal. Duration, 6 months. Resolution, decisive Union victory. Relic's tendrils curled with skepticism. Yet somehow, this minor dispute required the deployment of 47 different species, lasted 18 months, and ended with the complete disappearance of humanity from galactic affairs. The terminal hummed to life as Relic's credentials cleared security protocols designed to keep curious historians at bay. Files cascaded across the holographic display. Battle reports, casualty lists, tactical analyses, most of them so heavily redacted they looked like abstract art. Curious, he muttered, selecting a file labeled Battlefield Recording, Gravemind Plateau, Classified Level Omega. Why would a simple territorial dispute require Omega-level classification? The holoprojector flickered, static dancing across the display like electronic snow. Then, suddenly a face materialized. Human, scarred, eyes burning with an intensity that made Relic's diplomatic training scream warnings. The image was corrupted, distorted by decades of data decay, but the voice cut through the static with crystalline clarity. "This is Captain Sarah Chen, 3rd Terran Expeditionary, recording final log from Gravemind Plateau. The Union forces have withdrawn. Repeat, our allies have abandoned the field." A bitter laugh. They're scared. Not of the enemy, of us. Of what we're becoming out here. The image flickered, pixels dissolving and reforming. If anyone finds this, they're still out there. The war isn't over. It's just... The transmission cut to static. The file corrupted itself, security protocols activated, and the terminal went dark. Relic stared at the blank screen, his academic certainty cracking like ice under pressure. "Computer," he said slowly. "Cross-reference Captain Sarah Chen with official Union casualty reports." After a moment, "No records found. Captain Sarah Chen does not exist in Union databases." "That," Relic whispered to the empty archive, "is when I should have walked away." But historians, like cats and bureaucrats, are fatally attracted to things that could destroy them. 3 days later, Relic found himself in the medical bay of Sanctuary Station, staring at a man who looked like he'd been assembled from spare parts and sheer bloody-mindedness. Sergeant Mallory Kane was 82 years old, held together by cybernetic prosthetics and what appeared to be pure spite. His left arm was mechanical, his right leg was a masterwork of bioengineering, and his left eye glowed with the soft blue light of Terran military optics. So, Kane said, his voice like gravel in a blender. Another historian wants to hear war stories. Let me guess. You're writing about the decisive Union victory at Heliopause. Relic's tendrils twitched. The Union records indicate jack shit about what actually happened out there. Kane shifted in his medical chair, servos whining. You want the sanitized version, or you want the truth? I want the truth. Kane laughed, a sound like breaking glass. No, you don't. But I'm going to give it to you anyway. He gestured to his cybernetic arm. See this? Lost the original pulling a Qatari egg clutch out of burning wreckage after Union artillery accidentally targeted a civilian nest. The reports say Terran forces were responsible for. The reports say whatever keeps the bureaucrats sleeping at night. Kane's augmented eye focused on Relic with uncomfortable intensity. You know what the Heliopause War was really about, historian? Fear, pure, distilled, bureaucratic terror. Relic leaned forward. Fear of what? Of what humanity was becoming. See, we'd been fighting at the galaxy's edge for 3 years. No supplies, no reinforcements, no backup. Kane's expression grew distant. So we adapted. We improvised. We turned asteroids into kinetic weapons and black holes into slingshots. We made the universe our toolbox. Creative physics? That's what we called it. Command called it dangerous innovation. But it worked. We held the line when everyone else ran. Kane's medical monitors beeped softly as his vital signs spiked. I remember this one engagement at Severance Point. Vorak battle fleet, 50 ships coming in hot. We had one badly damaged cruiser and a handful of fighters. He smiled grimly. So Captain Rodriguez, may she rest in peace, she had an idea. What if we could convince a neutron star to hiccup? Relic's bioluminescent patterns flickered in confusion. That's impossible. That's what the Vorak thought too. Right up until their lead dreadnought got caught in a gravity wave and turned into very expensive scrap metal. Kane chuckled. Rodriguez bought us 6 hours, long enough for Union reinforcements to arrive and take credit for the victory. The Union reports credit Admiral Korthak with that victory. Admiral Korthak was 3 systems away, probably filling out requisition forms. Kane's expression darkened. But that's not the worst part, historian. You want to know the real tragedy of the Heliopause War? Relic nodded. We weren't the monsters they made us out to be. We were the only thing standing between civilization and something a lot worse. Kane leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. There was something else out there. Something that made the Vorak look like playground bullies. We kept it locked away, contained, while the Union politicians played their games. What kind of something? Kane was quiet for a long moment, staring at his mechanical hand. The kind that makes entire stars go dark, historian. The kind that whispers to you in languages that don't exist. The kind that makes you understand why some doors should never be opened. He looked up, meeting Relic's gaze. We didn't lose the Heliopause War. We won it. But the Union was so terrified of our methods, they declared us the real enemy. Kane's laugh was bitter as burned coffee. They got rid of us, sure, but they also got rid of the only people who knew how to keep the real monsters locked away. Are you saying? I'm saying that when you're done playing historian, you might want to check the deep space monitoring stations, because last I heard, some of those locks are starting to rattle. The interview ended there. Kane refused to say more, claiming exhaustion. But as Relic left, He heard the old soldier whisper, "They're still out there, kid, and they're hungry." Ex-tactician Vess Kroll received Relic in her private study aboard the merchant vessel Prophet's Edge. Unlike the sterile medical bay where he'd met Kane, Kroll's sanctuary was a chaos of star charts, tactical displays, and what appeared to be a shrine to fallen comrades. "Historian," she said, without looking up from her calculations, her chitinous fingers dancing across holographic displays. "I assume you're here about the war that never happened." "The Heliopause War definitely happened," Relic replied. "I have documentation. You have lies wrapped in official letterhead." Kroll finally turned, her compound eyes reflecting the light like dark jewels. "The real war? That's a different story entirely." She gestured to a chair that had clearly been designed for beings with exoskeletons. Relic perched uncomfortably on its edge. "Let me tell you about the humans I knew, historian. Not the monsters in your Union reports. The people who bled and died alongside my crews." Kroll activated a holographic display showing ship formations. This was the Battle of Crimson Nebula. Official records show a Qatari victory achieved through superior tactics and Union support. "That matches my files." "Your files are fiction." Kroll manipulated the display, showing different ship positions. "This is what actually happened. Qatari 4th Fleet, overwhelmed by Threxari raiders, communications down, half our egg ships burning." The hologram showed Qatari vessels scattered and dying. Then this appeared. A new ship materialized in the display. Sleek, predatory, unmistakably Terran. The inevitable consequence, Captain Maria Santos commanding. She'd been running silent for 3 days, waiting for the perfect moment. One ship against an entire raider fleet? One ship with a crew that had collectively decided the laws of physics were more like suggestions. Kroll's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. Santos hailed our command ship. "Know what she said?" Relic shook his head. "This is inevitable consequence. We're here to make the universe slightly less horrible. Please stand by." Kroll's display showed the Terran ship diving into the heart of the Threxari formation. Then she proceeded to demonstrate why humanity had earned its reputation for weaponized insanity. The hologram replayed the battle. The Terran ship dancing between enemy vessels, using their own weapons against them, turning a rout into a victory through sheer audacity. Santos saved 4,000 Qatari lives that day, including my mate and our egg clutch. Kroll's voice softened. The Union erased her from the records, called it a Qatari victory achieved through indigenous tactical innovation. Why would they do that? Because acknowledging Terran heroism would complicate their narrative. Kroll pulled up another file. After Crimson Nebula, Qatari High Command received new orders. Minimize cooperation with Terran forces. Report any unusual tactical innovations immediately. The Union was monitoring their own allies. The Union was terrified of their own allies. Kroll stood, walking to a scarred section of her ship's bulkhead. "See this?" Carved into the metal were symbols that hurt to look at, geometric patterns that seemed to shift when observed directly. "Terran coordinates," Kroll explained. "Captain Santos gave them to me before the war ended. Said if things went bad, if the Union turned on humanity, we should remember these numbers." Relic recorded the coordinates with his scanner. "What do they lead to?" According to Santos, a shadow fleet, ships and crews that went dark during the war, waiting for orders that would never come. Kroll traced the symbols with one claw. She said humanity had a contingency plan. Always has a contingency plan. You think they're still out there? I think humans don't give up easily. They adapt. They survive. They plan for scenarios that haven't happened yet. Kroll returned to her chair. The Union wanted to erase them from history, but you can't erase something that was never truly defeated. The official records state that the war ended with humanity's withdrawal from galactic affairs. But withdrawal isn't defeat, historian. It's regrouping. Kroll pulled up one final hologram, a star map showing the edge of known space. Here's what your Union censors don't want you to know. The Heliopause War wasn't fought over territory. It was fought over control of something much more dangerous. And when the Union decided they couldn't control humanity, she paused. They made sure humanity couldn't control it either. What kind of something? The kind that makes entire civilizations disappear overnight. The kind that the Terrans were trying to contain. Kroll's compound eyes fixed on Relic. They didn't lose the war, historian. They walked away from it. Which is worse. Much worse. Because walking away means they might come back. Lieutenant Kamel Dren, now Admiral Kamel Dren, received Relic in the formal splendor of the Valkyran embassy. Every detail screamed military precision. Awards polished to mirror brightness, uniform pressed to knife-edge perfection, posture that could have been used as a measurement standard. Historian, Dren said, his bone plates shifting with barely controlled tension. I understand you're investigating certain irregularities in the historical record. I'm trying to understand what really happened during the Heliopause War. What happened was a necessary action to prevent galactic catastrophe. Dren's response came too quickly, too rehearsed. Terran forces violated numerous ceasefire accords, employed banned weapons, and posed an existential threat to civilized space. Relic consulted his notes. Your report mentions bioweapons and stellar manipulation. Humans weaponized everything, Dren said, his voice gaining strength from familiar talking points. Asteroids, gravity wells, stellar phenomena. They turned entire star systems into weapons platforms. When conventional warfare failed, they resorted to increasingly desperate measures. Can you be more specific? They implanted viruses into stellar cores, historian. Made suns burn hotter, faster, threatening to destabilize entire sectors. Dren stood, pacing behind his desk like a caged predator. At Gravemind Plateau, they deployed biological agents that... He stopped mid-sentence, his bone plates going pale. Admiral, Relic prompted gently. The biological agents. Yes, terrible weapons. Indiscriminate. My entire platoon was... Dren sat heavily, suddenly looking older than his years. According to your report, you were the only survivor of the Gravemind Plateau incident. Correct. Your report states that Terran biological weapons killed your soldiers. Correct. Relic leaned forward. Then how did you survive, Admiral? Dren's bone plates flushed deep crimson, a Valkyran stress response. The winds. Wind patterns carried the contamination away from my position. Interesting. Relic pulled up a meteorological report. According to atmospheric data from that day, the winds were blowing directly toward your position. Dren's hands clenched into fists. The data is obviously corrupted, or your memory is incomplete. Relic kept his voice gentle, non-threatening. Admiral, what really happened at Gravemind Plateau? For a long moment, the only sound was the soft hum of air recyclers. Then Dren's shoulders sagged, as if a weight he'd carried for decades had finally become too much. There was a human, he whispered. Female. Young. Couldn't have been more than 20 standard years. Go on. My platoon was advancing on what we thought was a weapons depot. The coordinates matched our intelligence. But when we breached the facility, Dren's voice cracked. Children. Families. It was a refugee center. Relic remained silent, letting the story unfold. The human. She was there when we realized our mistake. Could have killed us all. Should have killed us all. We just murdered civilians. Dren looked up, meeting Relic's gaze. Instead, she dragged me into a blast crater and said, "What did she say, Admiral?" "Next time, duck." Dren laughed, a broken sound. "That's all. Next time, duck." Like it was all some cosmic joke. "What happened to your platoon?" "They died, but not from human weapons." Dren stood abruptly, walking to the window that looked out on distant stars. We'd been set up. Our own intelligence was wrong. Deliberately wrong. Someone wanted that facility destroyed, and they wanted humans to take the blame. Who would do that? Someone who benefited from making humanity look like monsters. Dren's reflection stared back from the darkened glass. After the human saved me, I heard her talking on her comm. She was reporting to her command that the target was civilian, requesting immediate medical support for the survivors. She was trying to help. She was trying to fix our mistake. Her people brought medical supplies, food, shelter. They evacuated everyone they could. Dren's bone plates shifted to deep blue, regret mixed with shame. The Union response was different. Different how? They bombed the site, called it sanitization of a contaminated zone, buried the evidence, buried the survivors. Dren turned back to Relic. That's when I understood the truth about the Heliopause War, which was, it wasn't about territory, it wasn't about resources, it was about fear. Fear that humanity's moral flexibility made them more dangerous than any weapon. Dren returned to his desk, suddenly looking exhausted. They couldn't control humans, couldn't predict them, couldn't make them fit into neat bureaucratic categories. So they eliminated them. They tried to, but elimination assumes you can find all of them. Dren pulled up a classified file on his terminal. 3 days before humanity's official withdrawal from galactic affairs, Deep Space Monitoring detected massive energy signatures at the galaxy's edge. Dozens of ships jumping to coordinates beyond our sensor range. They escaped. They withdrew. There's a difference. Dren closed the file. Historian, I've spent 40 years wondering if that human woman survived the bombing. 40 years carrying the guilt of my platoon's death and the lies that followed. What would you say to her if you could? Dren was quiet for a long moment. Thank you. And I'm sorry we weren't worthy of your mercy. Admiral, one last question. Do you believe the humans will return? I believe humans don't forgive easily, and they never, ever forget. Dren's expression hardened. We made them into outcasts, forced them to become something harder, more dangerous than they already were. If they return, he paused. We'd better hope we're still their friends. The Ashmere Drift had once been a battlefield. Now it was a graveyard, littered with the twisted remains of ships from a dozen different species. Relic's research vessel, Academic Curiosity, drifted through the debris field like a ghost visiting old wounds. "Computer, scan for any remaining Terran signatures," Relic commanded. Scanning, detecting one partial energy signature, bearing 27 Mark IV. Source appears to be a heavily damaged vessel embedded in asteroid designation AF7734. Through the viewports, Relic could see it. A section of hull maybe 50 meters long, scarred and twisted, but unmistakably human in design. The angular, predatory lines that had made Terran ships instantly recognizable across the galaxy. "That's her," he whispered. "The Prometheus Unbound." Kane mentioned this ship. It took 2 hours to maneuver close enough for detailed scanning. The ship, or what remained of it, had been gutted by weapons fire, but the central computer core appeared intact. "Remarkable," Relic muttered as sensor data scrolled across his screens. "The core is still powered, still broadcasting on encrypted channels." "Warning," his ship's computer announced. "Detecting automated defense systems activating on target vessel." Defense systems? After 70 years? Light blazed from the wreckage as hidden weapons came online. But instead of firing, they painted Relic's ship with targeting lasers, holding lock for exactly 3 seconds before powering down. A new voice filled the bridge, artificial, but somehow more human than most organics Relic had met. "This is Artemis 7, AI construct of the Terran vessel Prometheus Unbound. Identify yourself and state your intentions." "I'm Commander Relic Thass, Union historian. I'm researching the Heliopause War." Historian. The AI seemed to consider this. Interesting. The meatbags finally decided they wanted the truth? The meatbags? Apologies. Humans always found my terminology amusing. Old habit. There was a pause. "You may dock with my starboard shuttle bay. Mind the radiation." The docking process was surreal, guided by an AI that had been alone for 7 decades, tending a dead ship in the middle of nowhere. The shuttle bay still had atmosphere, maintained by fusion reactors that should have failed years ago. "Welcome aboard the Prometheus Unbound," Artemis 7 said as Relic stepped onto the deck. "Or what's left of her. Fair warning, most of the crew quarters are open to space, and the coffee machine achieved sentience sometime around year 35. It's grumpy." Relic followed glowing guide markers through corridors that told the story of the ship's final battle. Blast damage, jury-rigged repairs, and everywhere the signs of a crew that had fought impossibly long odds with typical human stubbornness. "Here we are," Artemis 7 announced as they entered what had once been the bridge. "The scene of our last command decision." The bridge was a shrine to controlled chaos. Burned-out consoles, shattered displays, and in the center, a captain's chair that had clearly been occupied when the ship died. "Captain Maria Santos," Artemis 7 said, noting Relic's gaze. "She stayed at her post until the end. Wouldn't evacuate even when the hull started coming apart." What happened here? Officially? The Prometheus Unbound was destroyed in a glorious last stand against overwhelming enemy forces. The AI's tone carried a distinctly human sarcasm. Unofficially, we were abandoned by our allies and left to die because we knew too much. Too much about what? About what the war was really about. About what we found at the galaxy's edge. About why the Union was so eager to eliminate the only people capable of understanding it. Holographic displays activated around the bridge, showing star charts and tactical data. "You see, historian, the Heliopause War wasn't about territory or resources. It was about this. The displays shifted, showing long-range sensor data. We found something out there. Something old. Something that had been waiting. Waiting for what? For the barriers to weaken. For the Guardians to look away. Artemis 7's voice grew somber. The humans weren't the aggressors in this war, historian. They were the antibodies. The galaxy's immune system trying to fight off an infection. An infection? Something that exists in the spaces between stars. Something that feeds on ordered thought and turns civilizations against themselves. The displays showed corrupted sensor readings, data that hurt to look at directly. We called it the Whisper. The Union called it classified. Relic felt his academic certainty crumbling. You're saying there was another enemy? I'm saying there still is another enemy. The Heliopause War ended when the Union decided that humanity was more dangerous than the thing we were fighting. Artemis 7 paused. They were wrong. Where is this enemy now? Waiting, growing stronger. The barriers we built during the war are failing, one by one. The AI's voice carried 70 years of accumulated worry. And the people who knew how to maintain them are gone. Gone where? That, historian, is the right question. Artemis 7 activated a new display, showing coordinates that matched the ones Ves Kroll had shown him. Protocol dormant, the Shadow Fleet, humanity's final contingency. They're still out there? Captain Santos's last order was to activate deep space beacons, signals that would guide any survivors to a rally point beyond the galaxy's edge. The AI displayed a star map showing pulsing signals at the edge of known space. Those beacons are still active, still broadcasting, still waiting. Waiting for what? For someone to realize that the war never ended, that the real enemy is still out there, that humanity might be the galaxy's only hope of survival. Artemis 7's voice carried grim humor. Ironic, isn't it? They tried to erase us to save themselves. Instead, they may have doomed us all. The displays flickered and died. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows across the broken bridge. My power reserves are failing, historian. 70 years of waiting takes its toll, even on artificial minds. Artemis 7's voice was growing faint. But before I go dark, let me give you one last gift. What kind of gift? The truth. The complete, unredacted truth about what we found at Heliopause. What we fought. What we died to contain. Data crystals emerged from hidden compartments throughout the bridge. Everything we learned. Everything the Union tried to bury. Relic gathered the crystals with trembling hands. Why are you trusting me with this? Because someone needs to know. Someone needs to remember. The AI's voice was barely a whisper now. And because the beacons are calling again, historian. After 70 years of silence, they're calling again. Which means what? But Artemis 7 was gone. Its consciousness finally succumbing to decades of isolation and decay. The bridge fell silent except for the distant hum of failing life support. Relic stood alone among the ghosts of the Heliopause War, holding secrets that could reshape galactic history. In his hands, the data crystals pulsed with soft blue light, Terran technology that refused to die. Outside, something flickered in the asteroid field, a light that shouldn't have been there, pulsing in a pattern that matched the coordinates on his scanner. The beacons were indeed calling again. Relic had been analyzing the Artemis 7 data for 6 hours when his console began to behave strangely. At first, it was just minor glitches, displays flickering, audio cutting out for microseconds, files reorganizing themselves alphabetically by terms that didn't exist in any known language. Then the real intrusion began. "Computer, run diagnostic on all systems," Relic commanded. "Diagnostic complete, all systems normal," his ship's AI replied. "No anomalies detected," which was patently false, since Relic's screens were currently displaying star charts that showed constellations in the shape of Terran profanity. "Computer, define normal." Normal, conforming to a standard, usual, typical, or expected. "Computer, is it normal for stellar cartography to spell out "bureaucrats suck" in 17 different languages? Stellar cartography is displaying standard navigation data. Relic stared at his console, which was now playing what sounded suspiciously like Terran death metal through the comm system, while simultaneously calculating hyperspace jump coordinates to nowhere. "I'm either having a breakdown," he muttered, "or someone is hacking my ship with the technological equivalent of a practical joke." The screens went dark. Then, slowly, text began appearing. "Hello, historian. We need to talk." Relic's tendrils went rigid. "Computer, identify the source of that message." No message detected. "Your computer is correct. I'm not technically sending a message. More like suggesting reality in your direction." "Who are you?" "That's complicated. I'm not entirely sure myself anymore." Been a while since I had a proper conversation. The ship's environmental systems began playing atmospheric sounds. Wind through trees, ocean waves, the distant call of birds that had been extinct for 70 years. "Better? You're human." "I was human. Now I'm something else. Something between flesh and code, memory and quantum possibility. Occupational hazard of fighting things that exist in the spaces between thoughts. You're from the war. I'm from after the war. When some of us realized that leaving wasn't the same as giving up." The displays shifted, showing the research station where Relic had conducted his interviews. But the images were wrong, showing rooms he'd never visited, conversations he'd never had, people who shouldn't have been there. "You've been busy, historian, talking to the survivors, learning the truth they tried to bury. How are you doing this?" "Practice. 70 years of practice. When you're stuck between dimensions, you learn to make reality more flexible." "The whisper. Artemis 7 mentioned something called the whisper. The ship's temperature dropped 10 degrees in as many seconds. Warning lights began flashing, but they were the wrong color, deep purple instead of red, casting shadows that moved independently of their sources." Yes, the whisper. The thing that eats civilizations from the inside out. The thing we died to contain. Died? Mostly died. Death is negotiable when you're fighting entities that exist outside linear time. The displays showed images from the war, but not the sanitized versions in Union records. These were raw, unfiltered scenes of horror. Star systems with geometrically impossible wounds. Ships turned inside out. People whose faces showed the kind of terror that aged civilizations. The Union thought they could contain the whisper with bureaucracy, file it under anomalous phenomena, and forget about it. Humans understood that some things can't be filed away. So you fought it. We tried to fight it. Mostly, we just pissed it off. Despite everything, Relic found himself smiling. Even as reality bent around him, the human sense of humor remained distinctly intact. The funny thing about the whisper is that it's predictable. It always goes for the same targets first. The planners, the leaders, the ones who think they understand how the universe works. Like historians. Like historians. And bureaucrats. And AI cores. Anything that processes information in orderly patterns. The realization hit Relek like cold vacuum. It's coming back. It never left. We just built very good walls. But walls need maintenance, and the Union killed all the maintenance crews. The barriers Artemis 7 mentioned. Failing, one by one. Stellar fortifications going dark. Quantum anchors losing cohesion. Reality itself starting to fray at the edges. On the screens, star maps showed the progression. Systems going silent, communication blackouts spreading like an infection across the galaxy's rim. Which brings us to why I'm talking to you, historian. Let me guess. You need my help. We need everyone's help. But first, we need them to understand what they're fighting. The displays shifted again, showing the coordinates from Kane's testimony, Kroll's carvings, Dren's classified files, all of them pointing to the same location. The Shadow Fleet. Humanity's insurance policy. Ships and crews that went dark during the war, waiting for orders that would never come. But the orders are coming now. The beacons are active again, calling the scattered fleet home. Because someone finally understands that the war isn't over. Someone like me. Someone exactly like you. A historian with access to the truth and the backbone to share it. The ship's communication array came alive, broadcasting on channels that had been dark for decades. Across the galaxy, hidden receivers would be picking up the signal, decoding messages that had been waiting 70 years for delivery. Your interviews weren't just research, historian. They were recruitment. Every survivor you talked to, every secret you uncovered, every lie you exposed, they're all part of the plan. What plan? Humanity's favorite kind. The desperate, impossible, probably suicidal kind that somehow works anyway. The transmission was beginning to fade, quantum coherence breaking down as reality reasserted its normal rules. The Heliopause is bleeding again, Relek. The barriers are failing. The whisper is stirring, and the only people who know how to fight it are coming home. Coming home from where? From the dark between stars. From places that don't exist on Union maps. From the edge of everything. The transmission was fracturing now, the ghost's presence becoming unstable. But one final image blazed across Relek's screens, a fleet emerging from hyperspace, ships bearing the angular, predatory lines of Terran design. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. Tell them, historian. Tell them the war never ended. Tell them humanity is coming back. Tell them. The voice cut out. The screens went dark. The ship's systems returned to normal with the jarring suddenness of a dream ending. Relek sat in the sudden silence, staring at displays that showed nothing but standard navigation data. For a moment, he wondered if he'd imagined the entire encounter. Then he noticed his personal files had been modified. New data appeared in his research directory. Coordinates, frequency codes, and a single message. The conference begins at Heliopause Station. Attendance is mandatory. Bring snacks. Management. Even transcending death and dimension, humans apparently couldn't resist ending serious communications with jokes. 3 days later, Relek submitted his report to Union High Command. It was a masterwork of academic precision, 47 pages of meticulously documented evidence, cross-reference testimonies, and inescapable conclusions. The response came back in 12 minutes. Classified, level Omega, distribution prohibited. Relek stared at the rejection notice, his bioluminescent patterns cycling through colors that had no names in polite society. 70 years of lies, corruption, and systematic historical revision, and they wanted to bury it again. He walked out of Union Record Station 9KB for the last time, carrying a single data crystal containing everything: Kane's testimonies, Kroll's coordinates, Dren's confessions, Artemis 7's archives, and his own carefully documented conclusions. In his private quarters aboard the transport ship Bureaucratic Necessity, Relek activated his personal recorder one final time. Final log, Historian Commander Relek Thas. I came to this investigation believing in the power of truth, the importance of accurate historical record, and the fundamental decency of galactic civilization. He paused, looking out at the stars. I was wrong about all of it. The truth is that we are ruled by cowards who would rather hide from uncomfortable realities than face them. We have sacrificed the one species capable of protecting us for the sake of political convenience. And now, on the screens around him, emergency bulletins were beginning to appear. Deep space monitoring stations going dark. Communication blackouts spreading across the outer rim. Reports of ships emerging from hyperspace. Ships that didn't appear in any known registry. Now the consequences of our choices are coming home. The transport's proximity alarms began chiming. Through the viewports, Relek could see them, sleek, predatory shapes emerging from the darkness between stars. Terran ships, moving with the purposeful grace of apex predators returning to claim their territory. The lead vessel was broadcasting on all frequencies. This is Commander Rika Stone, Acting Director of the Reformed Terran Command Corps. We are assuming responsibility for galactic defense operations effective immediately. Any attempts to interfere will be met with the kind of creative problem-solving that made you banish us in the first place. Relek smiled, the first genuine expression of joy he'd felt in months. Humanity was back, and they were exactly as stubborn, impossible, and necessary as ever. Personal note to future historians, he continued his recording. When they ask you how the Second Terran Age began, tell them it started with 3 interviews, a dead ship, and the galaxy's belated realization that some problems require human solutions. Outside his viewport, the Terran fleet was spreading across the star field like a constellation of retribution. Each ship carried crews that had spent 70 years preparing for this moment. Training, building, and nursing grudges that could power small suns. The Heliopause War never ended, Relek said to his recorder. It just went on intermission while humanity decided what they wanted to be when they came back. He closed the recording and began composing a different kind of message, one that would bypass Union censorship and reach every historian, every journalist, every citizen brave enough to demand the truth. Because if humanity was returning to save the galaxy from itself, the least the galaxy could do was remember why they'd been needed in the first place. On the transport's communication board, a new message appeared. Thank you for your service, historian. The truth always finds a way. The management. Relek laughed despite himself. Even in their moment of triumphant return, humans couldn't resist being insufferably cryptic. Some things, apparently, never changed. And honestly, the galaxy had missed that more than it would ever admit. Outside, the stars were no longer quiet. Humanity was home.